Good day and welcome to Because Growth Matters. I'm your host, Daniel Robus, and this is the podcast for sales leaders who want to change their trajectory, for sales people who are considering getting into sales leadership, and for business leaders who want to know more about what we do. Strategy versus reality and where the two meet. Today, we are joined by someone who's lived that. He's led across the full sales spectrum, from tech boardrooms to founder-led startups, and now a sought-after revenue and growth consultant. I'm extremely excited to have Fergal O'Carroll, who's the principal and founder of Supercharge Sales Velocity, a consultancy focused on helping sales teams drive more high-quality opportunities, close bigger deals, and win faster. He is also the host of the popular Supercharge Sales Velocity podcast. He has the most amazing accent in the world, but more importantly, he has a wealth of experience. Fergal, good afternoon and welcome.
Well, what a terrific introduction, Daniel. I'm so pleased to meet you, and thank you so much for that kind introduction.
Fergal, I believe you're in Ireland and you're in Dublin. How big is sales and the proficiency, art and profession of sales and sales management in Ireland?
It's interesting because as a child, I had two passions. One was technology and one was, I'll call it creativity. I was crazy into drawing and painting and the arts, I suppose. And for me, sales gives me exposure to both. So you've got that creative side, the storytelling, which is deep in the Irish tradition. You know, we've got so many famous literary giants, you know, from James Joyce to Samuel Beckett. Sales appealed to me after a while. Now, I did go into tech first, but I had that creativity side of me as well. And I kind of gravitated into sales over time. And that's why I think sales brings out the best in Irish people, because we have that storytelling element to it. It's in our tradition. And the best sales person is someone who's a good listener, but also a good storyteller. It's important, I think, to listen more than you talk, but still. So there's a good tradition, I think, in sales in Ireland. It's a small country. Let's not forget, Ireland is the smallest country in Europe. Our population is tiny. It's only about 5 million in the Republic of Ireland. We're fortunate that we're also a hub for many US companies. And we're unique in that sense, is that we're the only English-speaking country left in the European Union since Britain exited. And a lot of US companies have founded their headquarters for Europe here in Dublin City and elsewhere across Ireland. And that has given us exposure to international practices firsthand because they're located directly here. And our sales force has benefited from that. So we have Salesforce, HubSpot, Google, Facebook, Microsoft, any American company that you can think of has probably located their headquarters here. So that's been a tremendous help to, in my opinion, the sales community here in Ireland.
You've stepped from technology into frontline sale, into consulting in sales. When you were leading a team, what's the one thing that you've picked up that you wish you knew before you stepped into this role that could have set you apart from the rest?
That's pretty easy. I wish I'd read Mike Weinberg's book, Sales Management Simplified, before I got into sales management. It would have saved me a lot of heartache. I was fortunate enough to come across Mike in 2017. Coincidentally, I was reading his books and I got a tap on the shoulder and someone said to me, get some time in your diary next month because we have this guy called Mike Weinberg coming in to teach us. And I couldn't believe it because I was already reading his books. And I said, you mean the same Mike Weinberg that I'm reading the books? And they said, yeah, it's him. So to answer your question, like many people, I got into sales management because I was a decent salesperson, and then you tend to get promoted into sales management. It just seems to be the way. If you're good at one job, you seem to get promoted into a different job. I do feel I had leadership skills because I had already managed a sales team and an operational team before that particular time. But this time I was focused purely on sales. So Mike's book around Sales Management Simplified just sets out some of the basics that you need to do sales management correctly. You know, it's all about leadership and culture, great talent management, getting out in the field with your team, etc. And I think some of it is very straightforward and common sense, but at the same time, we all need reminders of that. So his book was fabulous for that. So it was almost a career influencing time in my life when I got introduced to that book. So I'd encourage anybody who's a first time sales manager, or even a first time manager, that's a book you should pick up. And Mike has actually enhanced that book. I think it's called The First Time Sales Manager, is also released now as well. But the original was Sales Management Simplified. So that was a tremendous experience, not just read the book, but to actually, within a month of reading the book, to be in front of Mike in a room and to be able to listen to him for a couple of days and just hear it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And I've been lucky enough to know Mike for a long time. So we're good friends now and business partners as well. So it's evolved since 2017 right up to now.
What do you think are the key rhythms, rituals, or tools that consistently drive performance that are non-negotiables for you that we should have in place?
I think you need a framework. Many of us in sales management have no framework. So when we have no framework, we often rely on our seller, our individual selling experience, and we try to become the hero. So instead of coaching and mentoring our sales players, we actually try and step in and be sales players alongside them and show them how it's done by actually doing itself. And then you fall into that trap of playing the hero. And it can be very unsettling for our team members. So I think number one is step back from that, recognize that you're no longer a seller, because most sales managers have been a seller at some point, and free yourself from that burden of trying to actually do the sales or help the sales. You'll often see a sales manager stepping in at the close because they're concerned, because they have the quota sitting on top of their head. They have senior management pushing down on them. And instead of trying to take the time to coach and mentor their sellers to close, they step in and try and close themselves. So that's another thing I see very frequently. So to drive sales performance, it's almost stepping back. It's being very conscious that you're no longer in that seller's role, having a framework to work against, being very clear with your team about what's expected of them. We're all in sales for one outcome, which is results. And let's not lose sight of that. Results are what counts. We've got to drive our pipeline. And we do that through activities. Another great concept is holding your team accountable. Oftentimes we let accountability drift, or again, we have no framework or process to actually hold people accountable. We don't know how to hold people accountable. And oftentimes we drift and we allow people to essentially stay in roles that maybe they're not suited to, or continue to pander to underperformance. And you can deal with underperformance in a very professional manner. It's not something you bring emotion to. You can deal with underperformance through coaching up. And unfortunately, sometimes it might require coaching out. But there's always an opportunity to coach people if you hold people to account in the right way. So it's a big topic. And like I said, I was lucky enough to come across Mike's framework back in 2017, and something I've tried to practice and execute in all my sales teams since then. It's worked really well. And it's taken time to understand it and get to grips with it, and made plenty of mistakes along the way. It's something it's held strong for me.
You've spoken 4 times. You've mentioned framework. For people who are not familiar with it, and like I've modeled and method it's what I teach, frameworks. But tell us what a framework means to you.
I mean, the word framework to me just means it's a set of strategies, processes, and systems. So there's 3 things involved. If I delve into maybe one framework that's close to my own heart, if we're trying to develop business from existing clients, and let's face it, you only grow revenue through 2 methods, right? So one is selling more to your existing clients, or you're acquiring new clients. Very few companies are good at both. I've worked for companies where we're pretty good in terms of, okay, we've initially acquired some clients, and then we're really good at selling, upselling, cross-selling to those existing clients. And the new business starts to fade away. We're not doing it at the same rate. Sometimes it's the other way. We're very good at acquiring clients, but we can't hold on to them for long. So we have to get better at acquiring new clients to make up for the fact that we're losing clients. But if we look at that area of existing clients, because most businesses are putting most of their energies into their existing client base. That's what I find. I've developed a framework around how to cross-sell and upsell there. And again, you asked me, what is a framework? Well, it's just a set of strategies and processes and systems. So if I look at account planning in a broad sense, you start off by looking at where I am with the client today. What's the current status quo? And this is actually where you have to be very honest and transparent with you. So here's part of the process now. I've got to be honest with myself about how things are with the client. And I've had scenarios where I've been talking to some sellers and I'm hearing about the status quo of a particular account, and it sounds very rosy. Sounds really good.
Of course. But what do you mean? This customer loves us. I go for coffee every Tuesday.
There's a lot of that going on, right? The happy year syndrome that they only hear the good. So your job then as a manager is to dig a little deeper in that. That's part of this framework that you've got to dig beneath that. And I've had examples where, again, I've heard things are pretty good. And then I kind of look at the historical revenue and where we're going with revenue growth. And I realize that revenue growth is actually declining. And when I mentioned that to the seller, it was, oh yeah, well, actually, they have consolidated some suppliers. Our business is shrinking a bit, but they think we're great. They love us and so forth. Okay, but there's actually an underlying problem here where if we continue at this rate, our business in this account is actually shrinking, not growing. So the status quo is not where we want it to be. Then the process moves on. We have to look at what the client is actually doing. Get in behind the client's initiatives. What are they actually trying to achieve? Again, a lot of our sellers are not that clear as to what their client is trying to achieve. They're more interested in our services, our offers, and pushing them on the client before they've actually done some good discovery work. It's not that easy sometimes to actually discover what the client's initiatives are. Yes, they can be published, they can be broadcast, but oftentimes the real initiatives are underneath those and are internal to the company. And unless you're close, unless you have a good relationship with the company, C-level and C-1 and so on, you're not clear what's going on in the client's world. So I also then encourage people to spend a lot of time around the client's initiatives and their needs. And you've got to have a great relationship to do that with them. You've got to have good engagement with them. And then you've got to be realistic as well as about doing a strength and a weakness and an opportunity and a threat, a SWOT analysis, which all adds to this understanding of the account, what they're trying to achieve. And it's only then that you start thinking about your offers and your services. So how do I align the two? Because now I understand what the client is trying to achieve. And then from that flows a vision. And I always try and create a joint vision. A lot of what I'm saying is there's nothing really new here in some ways, in that all of these things that I tell you about or talking to you about are understood by people, but yet they don't bring them together under a common framework so that they can actually consistently deliver an account plan for particular clients, key clients. So now we've got our vision. So now I have to sit down and understand, what am I trying to do with this client? Because now that I know their initiatives, there are certain initiatives that they're doing that are not relevant to me. So therefore I have to ignore those, but only focus on the ones that I think I can help with. And the reason I call it a joint vision is that you share it with the client. This is something that sellers tend to back away from. I've had experiences where people feel that account planning is something you do to the client. So I've had situations where peers of mine have said, well, I'm trying to sell X. I'm trying to get this kind of an upgrade. I can't tell the client that's what I'm doing, because as soon as I say that, they'll bring the shutters down and tell me they've no budget or they're not interested. So I have to kind of work in secret to try and get the client to buy, which is clearly doomed to failure. So the sooner you're open about what the vision is you're trying to achieve with the client jointly, so you're trying to collaborate with the client to help them achieve their initiatives and their needs, the client will probably warm to that. And now you're ready for the next stage. And the next stage is objectives. So what specifically are you trying to achieve? This can get very confused with people as well. They mix up objectives with strategies and goals and vision, and it all gets very muddy, but it's actually very straightforward. The objectives should just be binary. They can either happen or they can't happen. I then layer in on top of that. I bring it down to simple things. Usually, not always, but usually an objective relates to time and money. So when someone shows me an objective, I say, okay, show me the timing, show me the money. If they're not present, it's probably not an objective. So once I have those two components, I nearly always have a strong objective, because now I know here's something that I'm trying to achieve by a particular time, and it's got a monetary value on it. And I can determine that either happened or it didn't happen. There's kind of no ambiguity with that objective. So these objectives will align to the vision, will align to the client's initiatives. I'm starting to follow this framework, which is essentially this process I'm going through. Now that I've got my objectives, how do I actually achieve the objectives? What's next? Strategies. Okay, I need to get down into strategies. So I delve into now, okay, for each particular objective, what high-level strategy do I need to deploy here? If I've got an account and I want to renew that particular contract on a certain day, but I want to renew it for 30% higher than it currently is, well, what's my strategy to do that? So now I'm starting to think, okay, I probably need to get better connectivity or relationship going with a COO perhaps that I don't have today. That could be one strategy. And then below that, there'll be a series of tactics as to how to actually do that. And now we've come from this very high level vision all the way through to objectives, strategies, and now we're down to the meat. We're down to the day-to-day tactics that we need to get done, which can be called a close plan. I have a nickname for it. It's called a division to close. And now we're at the lowest level, if you like. And this is where you start bringing your team in, because the seller can't do this on their own. Often I'll see this vision to close and I'll just see the seller's name against all the different tactics. And I say, you've got a problem here. Yeah, where's your team? And this is where they have to start thinking, okay, I've got a wider team here. Bring the team into the account plan. Review it with me to double check all the vision and the objectives and the strategies, but help me deliver on the tactical piece. So this has been a very long answer to your original question, was what's a framework? But I think I've given you an idea as to what, in my opinion, what a framework should look like. So you have all these strategies, processes, and systems in play.
Amazing. I like the practicality of it. And it's actually quite easy to put in place, but it's, I imagine, hard to stick to for most sales managers. What does it mean for them on the day-to-day in your world? How often are we reviewing, seeing, or is that the work of the seller?
So the account plan in this example I'm given is owned by the seller. The sales manager is involved and is the overseer, is the quality controller as well. There should be someone above the sales manager who's also approving the plan. So typically a sales leader or maybe someone higher up, so that there's connectivity between the senior leadership and the seller in terms of what you're planning to do with a particular account. The challenge I see is the day-to-day often gets swallowed up in servicing the client and forgetting about the more strategic approach. So the seller gets bogged down in essentially just servicing the account and will say to you, I don't have the time to actually do any strategic planning or carry out the tactics. Okay, well then you're not going to grow the account. You're probably putting the account at risk and you're not using your time to the best because you're just servicing the account. So there's a mindset change required by the seller to step away from that and let the delivery team do their job. Yes, I understand the seller is often the central contact point and can get dragged into some of those firefighting conversations, but there's a skill set required there to be able to push some of that back. The sales manager also has to see this happening and also enable the seller to have time to do this. You're not tinkering with an account plan every day. The account plan is every 6 weeks or so, you should be coming back to revise it. But it's that low level vision to close. It's the tactics that you're working on. It's like anything in life, I suppose. You need to form a habit. And the habits will only be formed if the sales manager and the sales leader come together and they're all in alignment and agreement that this is how we're going to manage growth for existing clients. There's an effort required, not just from the seller, but it's also their sales manager and a sales leader, if that exists as well, so that jointly they understand if we really truly want to grow an account, that we have to have a structured approach. I have a maturity model that I talk to clients through, and many of them are at scale 1, which is a very reactive, unstructured approach to planning. In other words, they don't do any planning and they have very little understanding of the value that they deliver for their clients. But as you move through your maturity scale, the value that you deliver to your client will increase as the amount of planning you do and more structure you bring into play. It's like everything in life, bit of discipline just to stick to the plan.
I get that, because having the plan in place allows us to find out where there are leaks. And I mean, my next question is, you often called into situations where revenue is stalled. What are the steps a frontline manager can take when that momentum, that winning streak, that kind of closing habit is gone? What are the kind of 3 practical things you suggest to sales managers to get on the front foot again?
I've called my business Supercharge Your Sales Velocity for a reason. So sales velocity is actually just a very common sales metric. And for those who are not familiar with it, there's actually 4 underlying metrics. So we've got open opportunities. We've got the size of those deals with those opportunities, what size they are. Then we've got your historical win rate. And then the 4th one is the sales cycle length. So there's four metrics underneath that overall sales velocity. So when your sales velocity has slowed, which you just described, it's probably one of those 4. Could be all 4. There's an issue somewhere there. Now, sales velocity is an interesting metric. I just use it as a guide. I don't try to use the number specifically for any particular financial comparison. So as an example, if I said to you, Daniel, your sales velocity is €2,500 or dollars a day, and mine's also 2,500, and we work for the same company and we have very similar resources. When I dig down into the metrics below that, we could discover that, for example, your win rate is better than mine. However, I'm closing deals faster than you are. So even though our velocity is the same, we're producing essentially the same amount of booked revenue on a daily basis from our opportunities. There could be different strategies that you and I need to consider. So for example, I might need to consider why my win rate is not as good as yours. Or you might want to consider why are my deals taking longer to close. But there's an interesting correlation between them because you may take longer to close deals and that's why your win rate is higher. So there's some correlation there. So if I try and speed up your sales cycle, your win rate might start to fall. If I try to improve my win rate, perhaps it'll take me longer to close deals. And maybe that's not my style. I like to close things faster. So we've got all kinds of different personalities we're dealing with. So the sales manager who's faced with declining growth can look to the sales velocity metric and start to understand it to begin with, to get a sense of where their team is at. So you can do this at an individual level. So you and I can have our own sales velocity. We can roll it up to the team level so I can see what it's like at that level too. And then I can start layering in strategies to tackle individual parts of the metric. So let's say opportunities. I think if I can get more opportunities into pipeline, that will help spark some growth. Okay, well, how do I do that? We've already covered one framework, which is key account planning for your existing clients. This is how I can push more opportunities for each of those key clients by actually taking the time to strategically think, how can I align my offers with their needs? But what about the other side of the house, new prospects? Well, again, you'll find a framework there. So you need to understand your ideal client profile. So I've already got a bunch of key accounts. What if I could get a bunch that look the same as them? Because they're my ideal client. Your ideal client is usually some client who's purchased probably everything you have to offer. So it makes sense that if I can sell to more of them, it'll be an easier door to push open, right? So let me understand what my ideal client profile look like. Inside of that, there's buyer personas, people who buy from me. Who are they? What do they look like? What are their needs? Because they're different. The CFO is different from the COO, CTO, and so on. So get in behind that. I then tend to look at something called the value proposition canvas, which is it's a common framework, which also focuses on what they call jobs to be done. So if you're a CFO, you've got a bunch of jobs that you're trying to get done every day. Same with the CMO, same with the COO. But what's stopping them from getting those jobs done? Do you know? Do a bit of research, try and understand the typical hurdles that they're trying to get over. And at this point, you're thinking, okay, if I could align some of my services to be like a pill or a medicine to those issues that they're having, which is preventing them getting those jobs to be done. Now I have some correlation here and I can start to think about messaging. I get into this messaging conversation around how do I position my sales offer directly to that particular buyer persona. So there's two strategies here in terms of generating more opportunities that you can deploy. Then you move on to deal size. How do I get my deals bigger? Okay. Do I just increase my prices? No, I'm not saying it's not a strategy. It can be. If you've got something of extreme value and it's underpriced, of course, you're going to raise your prices. That's fine. I think generally if deal sizes are too small, it can often be a lack of ambition. So sellers will often go for the easier sell. I talked earlier, if your win rate is really good and maybe your sales cycle is good too, but your deal sizes aren't great, as in their average size, you might discover that this seller has no ambition. They're going for the easy pickings. They're not doing much discovery on the client's wider needs. They're focused on a very narrow set of needs because that's easier to close. They'll get the deal done in a relatively short space of time. But if they took a little longer, if they had more ambition and they took a little longer to do some discovery, they might uncover that not just this particular offer, which is meeting a particular need, is required. There's more here for us. Yes, the deal will take longer. Yes, it might be a more complex deal. Yes, it might involve more buyer personas. And again, a reason why many sellers shy away is because it just, that's a little too complex for me. I'll just keep it simple and I'll go for that. So the increase in the deal size, those strategies can be quite tricky. Not every seller is going to be able to lean into that. But again, the job of the sales manager is to be coaching and understanding and helping the sellers with their ambition to try and push harder on deal sizes. So again, you've got some good strategies around deal sizes. Win rates, if you are actually qualifying on a continuous basis, you'll have some impact on your win rate because, again, I've experienced so many times where the seller doesn't want to do discovery beyond what we call that initial discovery phase. So you might have one discovery call and the seller thinks, that's it, I'm done. I've discovered this client has a need and I'm going to push forward now with my whole sales process. And it's only when we get to close that suddenly the deal falls over and the reasons were apparent at the beginning, but the seller never asked. So it's just to be honest, it's just basics. It's just discovery hasn't been done properly. So we need to coach our sellers that the discovery just needs to be a continuous process throughout the whole sales cycle. And you've got to be building trust and understanding and credibility as you go, and handling objections very transparently. So many sellers have said to me, I didn't want to bring up this particular item because I felt that the buyer would have a problem with that, a certain feature or bell and whistle that we didn't have. So therefore I just didn't bring it up because I didn't want to lose the deal. But actually they lost the deal anyway because the client at the end of the day brought this up and it was too late to do anything about it. So again, win rates can be handled with many different strategies. And then to finish off sales cycle length, well, if I go back to that vision to close, I think a great way to reduce your sales cycle is, again, be upfront with the client and try and work backwards from a close date that you've mutually agreed. So many times, particularly in the corporate world, because we're all driven by quarterly deadlines, and you'll see it, every sales manager seeing this who looks at their forecast would see all of the sales opportunities with a date of the 29th, the 30th, the 31st, the end of the month stroke quarter. I used to ban that. Nobody was allowed to put in a date that began with 3 or 2 because it's too late. Like I used to say, are you seriously telling me that you're actually planning to close on the last day of the quarter? Like that doesn't sound like a good plan to me. And they'll usually say, no, I'm not planning that. I'm putting it in because, we got to get it closed in the quarter. I think I'll close it on a different date. And then it leads to more questioning. Well, really? Have you talked to the client about that? What's their thoughts? And they haven't talked to the client. They're not clear at all about what the client's capability of closing on that date. So it doesn't particularly matter what the date is, as long as the client has been exposed to that date. They can't always be 100% reliant or reliable in terms of telling you the date. And we've had dozens of times where clients will tell you they can close on a certain date and they can't. But at least you've exposed the date. And again, 8 times out of 10, when you expose the date, using your vision to close plan. So you say to the client, I'm trying to close this deal for us on this particular date. They'll tell you, no, that's not possible because I've got this, that, and the other internal process that I need to go through after all the selling is done. We've done all the selling. I've agreed I'm going to buy it, but there's a process I need to go through. So fine, get an understanding of that and then work backwards from that. The reverse of that is once you've got that line in the sand where you're trying to close, then you can actually realize, if I don't start a particular activity tomorrow or the day after, I can't actually meet that close date. I've actually done the homework that realizes if I need to close on that date, there's a bunch of activities that need to be done and some of them need to start next week. And actually, I haven't even thought of planning or starting that. And again, this is where you bring your bigger team in. A lot of discipline required for this type of activity, but successful sales teams and sales people, and earlier asked about driving sales performance, it's all down to the details. Sometimes you can have all the frameworks and the high level strategies and visions and all the rest of it. But if you're not dedicated to doing the work every single day and keeping the foot down on people and making sure that they're delivering to what they said they would deliver in your action plan, your close plan, whatever you want to call it, then it's likely that your deals, you're probably experiencing deals slipping all the time. You're having to explain why you didn't make the quarter because, and a lot of it is down to a lack of planning.
That planning and that thinking that you've spoken about, you've also said that the thinking that the sales manager has to do, is that what the C-levels understand the frontline leadership role should be doing? What do you think CEOs expect sales managers to do? And is it reflected on the ground? And is it right?
It's been my experience as a sales leader that depending on the company, a lot of the expectation on the sales leader is not related to the actual job at hand. So yes, of course, you've got to deliver the results, but you're kept a busy fool by all the corporate requirement for information. So sales leaders, and sometimes you've got a sales leader, sales manager combination, that they don't have the luxury of having a sales manager. So that they're actually a sales leader stroke sales manager combined. They're managing a team of salespeople, but they're actually in a C-level role and having to do C-level tasks and also managing up into maybe a group as well. And what I find there is that the group has no concept of, for example, the sales leader needs to be in the field with their team. They need to be coaching their team probably 30-40% of their time every week. That usually gets abandoned because the sales leader stroke manager has no time to actually do it because they're getting pounded upon from above for, in my opinion, ridiculous information that's probably available in the CRM system anyway, but the group or management team above them are just too lazy to go and look for it themselves and just think it's the sales leader's job to just sit there every day answering reports and, in my opinion, dumb questions that are coming at them day in, day out. And sorry, it's a bit blunt, but I mean, that's been my experience. They have no real concept of the reality of sales management is that you should be in the field with your team. You should be help coaching them. A vast majority of time should be spent trying to coach your team and not spent in these, I'll call them admin tasks by the sales management leadership.
So if you had 10 minutes with a room full of CEOs and you had to give an elevator pitch on the role of a well set up sales manager, what would the role be for you?
The role needs to be given the freedom and the breathing room to allow the sales manager to set a healthy culture of sales excellence. I used to call it sales excellence. And you do that through having a strong vision, a strong set of objectives and strategies to achieve the objectives. Give them the breathing room to be able to create them in the first place, to be able to hire the right talent. So you don't always have the right people in the right roles. And often sales managers coming in inheriting certain types of salespeople and sales roles. You need to give them the breathing room to set the mission, set the vision, set the strategies, to go hire the right talent. Then let them spend time with their A players and coach them, spend time with their B players and coach them, and let them actually do the day job and free them up from what I would call the administrative side of the business. Go hire sales enablement, go hire all the number crunches you want for that aspect of the business and free them up from that. There's also a responsibility above me. So, I'm given this elevator pitch, the responsibility on the people in this room to actually have a solid business strategy. Because me as a sales leader or a sales manager, my job is just to execute on whatever business strategy you've decided upon. It's not my job to set the business strategy. And often in smaller companies, there's an onus on, you're in sales, you go and set the sales strategy. That's not the case. It's the business strategy.
Just by the way, just take marketing as well and lead gen and yeah.
Correct. So there's a responsibility on the senior leadership team to set the strategy, to also set, and this is often at their level, to set a proper compensation plan. 9 times out of 10, the compensation plan in companies is just completely misaligned with what the company is actually trying to achieve versus what they're paying through the compensation plan. The compensation plans are overly complicated and just don't encourage the right behaviors from the sales team. So get that right, and then give me an opportunity to have at least B players in my team and not have to carry CRT players as well. So that's probably the message I would give.
Have you got an example where you've worked with a sales manager that just stands out for you, made a change, and you've just seen, wow, just a spike in performance that you always go back to and say, this is why I do the job I do?
I was in a sales leadership position. I had 4 or 5 sales managers working for me at the time across Europe, and we had a really strong sales management team. And we were lucky in that we were all aligned as to how we should run our businesses. And what we did was we made sure that we had a very strong accountability process across the entire sales team. So we probably had 20, 25 sales people and then a series of 5 managers above that. So I won't single out a particular manager because I felt all of them were strong in this particular area. And we applied this accountability process where we just ensured every month we went through people's results, their pipeline, their activity. And what it did was it flushed out a few individuals who really were uncomfortable with being held to account. And if we hadn't introduced that process, they probably would have drifted on because there'd be no structure or framework, if you want to call it that, or process in place to flush this behavior out. And I think that was probably one of the single most important things that we did as a business, was to apply that accountability framework across the entire sales team. And each manager got in behind it and it worked really well. And it's something I carried on doing in every business I've gone into. And in each case, it has positives in terms of people rise up to the occasion. They realize that maybe their results are not where they need to be. They need to drive more pipeline through different activity behaviors. And then there are those who are not up to being held accountable, and they effectively manage themselves out, which is also very effective for a business.
And getting an understanding of what's expected of you and then being okay with, hey, we're not aligned. Maybe I'm in the wrong place. can be somewhat of a relief. And these accountability agreements can be like, that's what you want me to do? Okay, maybe I'm in the wrong place.
Relief is actually a great word, because I've often found some sellers are relieved when 2 or 3 months into the process, we both come to the same conclusion. Look, this isn't going to change. We're not going to get where we need to be. And like I say, they kind of self-eject.
Correct. And, life is too short. We don't get a rerun. This is it. This is real life, isn't it?
Exactly.
Fergal, when you're under pressure or you need clarity as a leader and you're going into a new customer engagement, what's a practice, mindset, or mantra that springs to mind?
So my personality, and I can back this up with a few LinkedIn recommendations I've had, which is kind of interesting. So the way you go ask for a LinkedIn recommendation, and I've asked all the different managers I've worked for, and it's interesting when I was reading them back, the common theme throughout was I'll use the phrase calm under pressure. And I won't say in my personal life I'm necessarily a particularly calm person. I'm probably relatively so, but for some reason in business I'm even more so. And that's helped me a lot, because the one thing that people look for in leadership is that sense of, I would say, calm. You know what you're doing. And even if we're coming up against a situation where we've never faced this before, COVID is a classic example, that if the leadership is calm and are strategically thinking, then it calms the teams underneath them. So in my particular case, that was my approach to sales leadership and sales management in general. That I would never be the type to be shouting and roaring, and I could still be demanding, but it would be in a different style. It was a much calmer approach. And it just worked for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but that's something that worked for me.
Fergal, what's your 1% that makes you stand out for growth? What is the 1% you keep adding to that keeps your clients and yourself growing?
I'm lucky in one sense, but it was deliberate in that I partnered with a sales coach in the US, Mike Weinberg, who's known by many people. And I'm lucky enough to call him a friend and a business partner. And with him, I'm layering in some AI enablement into many of his offers, which we'll be talking about very soon. I think it's more than 1%, to be honest. The addition of AI enablement into the sales process is huge. Last week, I was at a conference in Nashville that I was speaking at. I was lucky enough to have 2 sessions to speak with the conference members, and it was all around how to win more new sales with AI strategies that can enable you to spend more time selling. Just to have that conversation with an audience who came up to me afterwards, and each person came up to me took something practical from the presentation I delivered around how to enable AI in their own businesses. And that, in my opinion, gives you way more than 1% on the competition. How can I differentiate myself from the competition? If I can AI enable my whole sales process and shrink the amount of time it takes to do a particular sales cycle. For example, I had a prospect call 2 days ago. I finished the prospect call, and within 48 hours, I had a very strong, solid proposal out the door. With the help of AI, not to replace my critical thinking or to actually do the work for me, but to assist me to get to a point where I was comfortable with this proposal. It was checking my proposal for errors or inconsistencies or problems. It was suggesting revisions to the proposal in certain areas based on the discovery call that I had. It would analyze the discovery call in detail and say, have you captured that particular requirement from the client in your proposal? I see a gap there. That type of assistance. So what I think would probably have taken me 4 days, probably took me 2 days. So now suddenly I'm that much faster in my sales cycle. I get more time now to do something else. For example, come on the show and talk to you instead of having to worry about getting a proposal out today. I got it out yesterday.
So AI for you is no longer an if or a when, it's a must-have. It's now not entry to the game, it's table stakes.
I think that's a great way of describing it. Absolutely. I mean, there's that old cliche, you won't be replaced by AI, but you'll be replaced by someone using AI. Yes, it's a boring cliche maybe at this stage, but I can see some truth in it, because if I just look at my own situation, if I'm up against someone in a similar business to me, they're not using AI and I am, I know for a fact that my sales cycle is going to be shorter, that my sales velocity will be faster, because I'm able to use AI to just enable so many different parts of the sales process. And if they're not doing that, I have a competitive edge. My suggestion is, if you're not on that train, you need to get on. The train has not quite left the station. There's still time, but get on it quickly.
And 3 quick tips on getting the best out of AI.
All the AI applications, whether it's ChatGPT, Gemini, Quark, you name it, they all have a freebie license. So the barrier to entry to AI now is zero. Just is literally just the URL, get in there. Second thing is, if you're a bit unsure as to how you even interact with AI, treat it initially like a search on a website. Just put in exactly what you would do on a Google or a Bing. Just do exactly the same thing. And then notice the difference in response. If you go to a search engine and you put in whatever you're searching for, what actually comes back is thousands of versions of the truth to your question. And then what you do is you visit each of these individual sites and you essentially select the version of truth you want. It might be from one site, it might be from many different sites, and you pull it together yourself. AI is not doing that. AI is giving you the version of its truth immediately. Now, that has positives and negatives. We need to be careful because we're not really sure how these AI models are trained, and they probably have a US West Coast bias, probably. And that's the version of truth that we're going to be given. So 9 times out of 10, we'll just take it. So I also suggest the third thing is don't use it as a replacement for your critical thinking. Be careful of AI. It does get things wrong. It does have its own biases. So just recognize that. But certainly, I think the benefits outweigh the disadvantages at this point. So use it critically. Don't become lazy. I had a great example there of an ex-colleague who described a situation where they fell into that trap of just using AI to produce something for a client. And unfortunately, the answer was incorrect. But luckily, it was caught by a peer before it went out the door. All was good. But it just highlighted to them, oh, hang on, I actually need to be careful here. I can use it as an assistant, but I do need to verify before I get something out to a client. So just be careful of that.
That's wisdom there, Fergal O'Carroll, ending with some wisdom, some practical stuff. I usually ask my guests, what's the one question you wish I had asked you? So I'm going to ask you that anyway and say, Fergal, what do you wish I had asked you?
You could ask me, I've been working at this for about 35 years. What was probably my proudest moment in my career? You can ask me that.
If we were having a glass of wine or a Guinness, what would be your proudest moment in your career?
I'm going to give you 2 instead of 1, right? So I was lucky enough I did 10 years in London. I came back to Ireland. I was lucky enough to work for a company. There was only 10 of us in the company at the time, and I was given a sales manager. Essentially, I'll call it a sales manager role, but it was really a general manager role. There was a lot of sales, but there was a lot of delivery. And I ran that team, brought it from just myself to about 25 team members. We were profitable every single month, partly because great comp plan, I was commissioned on profit. So I made sure we were profitable every month. And I did that for roughly 9 years. And I think that was a great achievement to be able to say that every single month for 9 years, I was able to do that. And then the second proudest moment was when I was working for a much larger company at a much larger scale. And I was thrown into a VP role. And to be honest, it was quite a challenging role. We were transforming the company at the same time. And I had suddenly inherited, I went from having something like 20 customers to having 170 customers overnight and a massive team across Europe. And I just knuckled down and I worked 7 days a week for about a month to basically just get over the initial shock of that. And I was able to basically get a grip on it. And that hard work in that first month set me up then for a very successful 17 or 18 months later. So they're probably the 2 proudest moments in my career. So thanks for asking, Daniel.
That's amazing. I really like that. And I think as sales leaders and salespeople, we don't stop to celebrate enough because the pipeline always needs to be full and the next quarter is always out there. And if we don't celebrate those moments, what's the message to our team? What's the message to our people around us? Are we only on this gravy train to go forward?
Yeah, growth mindset is important. Celebrate every win.
Where do people get hold of you? How do they connect with you and get your services, and where do they find out more?
So a good place to find me is on LinkedIn. You can just use my name. My website is www.sysvelocity.com. That's spelled SYS velocity.com, Supercharge Sales Velocity.com. So there'll be the 2 places you can reach out to me. My podcast, currently I've just finished season 2. So that's called the Supercharge Your Sales Velocity podcast. So that's on all the usual streaming channels. So they're probably the 3 main ways to go find me. And my services are listed on the website as well.
Brilliant. And what is your ICP? What's your ideal customer profile that you go to make a difference in?
I'm not limited, thankfully, to any particular industry or any segment in there. So it's essentially two: it's business owners and sales leaders, and maybe to a lesser extent, sellers themselves. But the typical economic buyer for my services would be a business owner or a sales leader. And I tend to deal with all sizes of companies, but companies who would have a sales team of at least 3 or 4 people.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Fergal, thank you for spending time with us. The best of luck with season 3. I hope that's going to come together well, and the best of luck with your new ventures. It's so lovely. I would like to have you back to talk around compensation, because it's an area that I fear to tread. So I'd love to learn more and just to open those doors and talk around comp plans and compensation plans and how do we get them. You've given me so many moments here, but I think your mic drop moment for me is objectives should be binary. Did that happen or not? Are they time or money? And that was just like a standout moment. So thank you for that. That was good learning for me.
Daniel, what a pleasure talking to you. I really enjoyed the conversation. Hope to meet you again. I'll get you over to Dublin and we'll get you golfing or take you out on the beach and obviously get you that pint of Guinness too.
From your lips to his ears. And from us at Because Growth Matters, have a lovely day. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Because Growth Matters. If you got value from today's conversation, please take a moment to rate the show 5 stars on your listening platform and share it with someone who might benefit as well. Don't forget to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. Catch you next week.